All right. Hi, everybody. How are you? We are here live today. We are talking about the power of questions. The power of questions is what we're talking about today. So let me just frame it up. We are looking at anytime you're confronted with anything, if it's a problem, if it's a circumstance you don't like, whatever that is, the fact is that we can get so mired in it that it's just nothing but trouble and fret and worry and all that stuff. And this is where questions can be really super powerful to lift you out of that particular stuck place, if you will, that give you a new way to look at or evaluate where you are and give you openings for action. So we're going to be exploring the power of questions in this episode. So welcome, Betty. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Excellent. So I just want everyone to know that we're sponsored by the Institute of Metaphysical Science. You can find them at https://scientificmetaphysics.org. And please check out the website, check out the ways you can participate, some of our materials if they're of interest to you, and all of that. And while you're listening, if you have a question, a comment, anything like that, just please enter it into the chat or into the comments area, either on Facebook or YouTube. Either way, we'll get them and we can incorporate them into our episode tonight. So I would really welcome any of that you have going on. So you can also like us or love the session or like the session. That's also good. So at any rate, on we go. So the power of questions. How do you want to start this out, Betty?
Well, I've been giving it some thought, and you shared something with me the other day, about a week ago or so, that really sparked some inquiry for me. And what I discovered was that if I can ask myself a question regarding whatever the problem is that's confronting me, I can get a little distance on it. I can take another view of it from a different angle. I can play with it a bit. Mm-hmm. And somehow that lifts a little of the heaviness that problems usually generate.
Yeah.
So the thing that you were sharing with me, I can read that if you want,
Sure, why not? Go for it.
Refresh your memory anyway. But in something you were reading, you said, if we were having this discussion 3 years from today, and you were looking back over those 3 years, what has to have happened in your life, both personally and professionally, for you to be happy with your progress? Yeah. What has to have happened? And right away, you leave the burdensome problem to think, what are all the things that would happen to have that not be a problem?
Yeah. Well, it's a thing that takes you out into that future and has you actually think. It's actually a fairly deep question, and it's one that actually is from Dan Sullivan, who's a management consultant and a consultant to entrepreneurs and business owners, and he's who has that question. So that's where I got it from.
Well, in addition to that, when you say it takes you out into the future, that may be the way it looks. But if I can imagine anything, it's present now.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is that it takes you outside the mire and your thoughts and your judgments, judgments, and opinions about the situation you're in right now.
Yeah.
And it had you actually look and see, what is it? What would have to have happened to have me be happy with the progress? And it's a deep question. It's actually a very good one. And one of the other things that I've been looking at along those same lines is a interesting course that's being offered and that I've been going through. It's kind of fun. But there's a quote, and it says, "We must learn to look at the world and everything in it, ourselves included, with an inner eye of understanding."
I like that.
Your physical senses will deceive you.
Yeah. For sure.
And don't we know that's the truth? We look at the world and we think, well, there it is. I'm looking at it. Except for what that is a reflection of consciousness, of your divinity in the best way you can see it. But is it really what's going on?
Yeah, you have to take into account from the human being point of view that the way you see things every day goes through a lot of filters that you've put in place over time. From the time you were a little kid, you learned not to touch the hot stove. You learned how to walk and talk and dress yourself and all those things really from the point of view and from the influence of the people around you, your friends, your neighbors, your parents, your brothers and sisters, your schoolmates. If you're working, you continue to learn that from the way you get treated at work.
Right.
It's all a filter that you adopt. You agree to adopt it because you want to get ahead in your profession.
Right.
You want to get along with your friends, or you want to be invited to the party, or whatever it is. But we do place a lot of filters between us and whatever it is we're looking at.
Yeah.
And we see it from a particular point of view.
Yeah.
And of course, the value of getting distance on that is that there are a million ways to see that.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to shake myself out of the one limited way that seems burdensome.
Right. And, there's a really good question that goes with that. And I remember back, and you could say, when you say like something happens and instantly we have what it means. If this happened, well, that must mean X, Y, Z. And we go there and we live as though that's true. So, yep. So imagine if it weren't. Imagine that what happened is just what happened. And then what you had it mean is just what you added to it. So then the question is, well, what else could it mean?
That's a good one.
What else could it mean?
Yeah.
Maybe it means that, but what else could it mean? And that's another really powerful question, right? So it has you start to look at your automatic take on the world you're looking at.
Yeah.
And the circumstances that you're in. Like, well, what else could it mean? What's another meaning that it could mean? And then you could say, well, I just made that one up. It's really this one. Maybe so, maybe not. But there's another quote, and this is from a Bob Proctor training that I'm taking. But he says, spirit is omnipresent. It is 100% evenly present in all places at all times. And when we go to study ourselves and think of what we are worth, there are only two sources of reference to which we can refer. One is science, the other is theology. And it's very interesting. It says spirit, goes on, lower down, says spirit is the basis for everything. Right? We know that as students of science. We have the ability to tap into this non-physical world of which we are a part. Now, we would say this non-physical world for which that is, it's all is one, right? But we can choose our thoughts, form whatever ideas we choose because we're free. And I thought that was interesting as well. So
very good. The thing that is true from the metaphysical point of view is that whatever is going on is reality present, functioning perfectly.
Yeah.
The way it is being seen as a problem is limited view.
Yeah.
Informed only by all your filters and what you've got going on between you and what's actually present.
Yeah.
So science starts out, basically saying you got to remember that everything is mind in action. All is infinite mind. And that's what's manifest. That's what evidence is present. And this thing I call a problem happens to be my current view of a perfect reality. So Mrs. Laird used to say to us, we need to pay attention to our seeing. Because when I just look, I've got a problem. But if I'm seeing, if I'm actually present to what's real, if I'm seeing that, things shift.
Yeah.
And in the world of science, everybody thinks that's a wonderful way to answer the problem. But it doesn't let you down. If you can ever get this sense that there isn't anything cut and dried, locking you in, casting you in concrete.
Right.
You know, we live and move and have being mentally and always have.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm seeing is a point of view that I have. What's present is reality, whole, perfect, complete, joyous, free, all that.
Yeah. And there's another thing that I think is interesting too, in these parallels about, science and then other disciplines that harken back to it, because it's all one thing going on. But here's one. Prayer, I thought this was interesting. Prayer is the movement that takes place between spirit and form. Isn't that fun? With and through us. And then it goes on to say, all prayers are answered. That is the law.
And they're answered before they're asked.
Right. So I'm just saying, it's like, now think about the power of that, the sheer power of that.
Of living.
And there is no other individual being you, right? You are unique. And what you've got to contribute, what you're here to contribute, and how that shows up is all unique for you. It's like a custom built world of experience.
Yeah. I know early on, or many, many years ago, I learned a lot from my husband because he was a rising executive and various problems would come along. And he had this terrific view that when something really came crashing down, he says, well, that means there's some other way to do it better.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, all right. But he actually lived that and it worked like a charm.
Yeah.
Something else would open up within a very short time and it would be the exact answer that he needed.
Yeah.
And it did it over and over and over. I learned a whole lot from that.
Yeah.
And I thought when you're facing a problem, you can get swept up in it. You can let it upset you or confuse you or be responsible for your lack of joy in the moment. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, if you really are living yourself as a source and condition that is mind in action, then you let that picture go and you say, well, I don't know why it looks that way, but on we go.
Right.
Because there is an answer that's already present.
That's right. And that's your understanding. It's your living of science. And so it's what this next quote is, you're gonna smile because you've said this in different ways, like a bazillion times. The results you get in your life are the physical manifestations of your understanding.
That's right.
Isn't that great? Because it is. So say more about that, because that's one way to say it, but you've said this all my life, right?
Yep. What do you want me to say about it?
Say more about it.
Read it again.
So the results you get in your life are the physical manifestation of your understanding.
Yeah. Well, everything that goes on in your life is evidence of who you're being.
Mm-hmm.
And who we're being is always the best view we've got of ourselves.
Right.
So if I can drop the attachment to the Betty picture, the attachment to having it look this way or that way, or give up on trying to maneuver it one way or another and leave it alone, I find out it behaves very well.
You get out of the way.
Yeah. It is the effort, the personal effort to force something to be the way you want it to be, in your belief that the way you want it to be is the right way. Mm-hmm. When science tells you, and living actually tells you, that what's going on for you is exactly right. If you get yourself out of the way and let it work out, you're home free.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's look at it.
No matter what the nature of the problem is.
Yeah.
It can be health, it can be relationships, can be financial. It doesn't make any difference. The only roadblock you've got, the only stumbling place you've got is the belief that the Betty knows more than the life principle functioning, calling itself Betty.
Yeah. And so one of the things, and that's what the power of questions help to yank you out of that, help to kind of give you a perspective that's outside of all the things you get mired in your human living. So let's look at a quote from Margaret Laird in Government is Self-Government, page 93. Quoting the modern artist Maurice Graves, the only thing illusory about the three-dimensional world of matter is that it's matter.
Yep, that's the illusion.
That's the illusion. And that's the same thing. That's the same thing as that physical world can be, it will deceive you. The physical world will deceive you. It's not the truth of what's going on.
Yeah, the physicists have already established that what we observe doesn't exist until we observe it.
Right.
So it's definitely mental.
Right. And she goes on.
There is no substance out there, although that is the way it looks.
Right.
If there isn't any substance out there to be fixed.
Right. And going on with that quote, matter is intellect. The universe is thought. And the only real space is the spacelessness of total consciousness.
Yep.
So that's
Mrs. Laird said fundamentally also is the realization that consciousness constitutes all there is and all that seems to be.
Right.
So consciousness is fundamental.
Yes.
Yep.
And then the next quote here is form is a straitjacket for being.
Yep. And the straitjackets limit you, don't they?
Yeah.
They restrain you. They won't let you do what you want to do. There's no freedom. Well, when you're locked into form, you're straitjacketing who you are.
So the way you get unlocked into form is to be willing to have it be exactly the way it is.
Leave it alone.
Right. So leave it alone and let your opinions and thoughts and judgments and beliefs about whatever's showing up, leave it alone.
Yeah, if you can do that, you will find that the solution is present, trying to come to the surface. Allow it to be.
Yep. And that's the same way of saying only when form is abandoned can one experience.
That's right. And the teacher in life is experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's look at this next quote from Government is Self-Government on page 95. Reality is unknowable apart from man as conscious identity. So reality with a capital R, not reality that we very quickly label, well, what's really happening. The reality, and it really labels the material world for us and our circumstances. We call that reality. But really, what are we talking about here when we say reality?
We're talking about being, what actually exists, the unseen presence that has all of the stuff we look at show up.
Yep.
And it shows up in a way that you can understand. So the way it shows up for you is different from the way it shows up for me, and so on. Right. It's all individual.
Yeah. And I think
I'm in the driver's seat.
Right. And I go back to, I remember a seminar you did when you said, all is infinite mind. And I'm not talking about all, like all of a box of cereal. I'm talking about all. And that goes back to this quote that I said at the beginning, that spirit is omnipresent. It is 100% evenly present in all places at all times. And when we go to study ourselves and think what we are worth, there are only two sources which reference that, but it's like all. Spirit is the basis for everything.
Yep.
All. And it's not just what you know, some people, when the chips are down, you say, yeah, I know all that stuff, but look I'm dealing with reality here.
Yep.
And
whether you know it or not, you are dealing with reality.
That's right. Whether you know it or not, mostly they don't. or I don't when I'm really caught up in something. Okay, so another quote from Science and Health from Mary Baker Eddy: allaying the fear of patients alleviates the symptoms of every disease. So say more about that.
Well, when something's in a chaotic, when something's looking troublesome, when something's upsetting, when your world seems chaotic, one of the things you need to get quiet about is say, now, wait a minute. Fundamentally, everything's all right. I know Betty's upset, but everything is all right. And the reason it's all right is because reality is perfection present. Now, I may not see it as perfection, but just knowing that fundamentally it's all right.
Right.
Kind of lifts me a little bit out of my, oh dear, this is awful point of view. And the more I can just leave that alone and say, well, I don't know why it looks this way. The hell with it. Just leave it alone. Then I find out that the answers do come up. I find there are solutions for every single thing that comes along. And all I have to do is get Betty out of the way.
Right. Right. Here's another one that's another kind of jogs the whole question thing. So again, it's like, here's the quote, and you won't agree with all of this, so I'm just warning you in advance. But it says, you have your past self, you have your present self, and you have your future self. Now ask yourself, which of these three is in control of you? Which of these three is in control of you? If it's your past self, you'll continue getting the same results year after year. The present self is a little more difficult to deal with because if it's a moving target and is constantly changing, or at least it should be, then take a look at your future self. What will you be doing in 3 years? That question harkens back to in 3 years from now. What has to have happened to be happy with the results or your progress, right? Answering that question will give you, so what will you be doing in 3 years? Answering that question will give you a great opportunity to draw on your native intelligence, your life's experience, and your imagination. And that lifts you out of current being mired. So it's an interesting thing to look at. It's interesting questions to ask.
Yeah. The thing that's important about asking questions, by the way, is that you need your answers. My answers are not your answers.
Right.
Now, I may say something that you pick up and say, oh, yeah, I can work with that.
Right.
Okay. But until you have it be yours, it's not an answer for you. Nobody tells you what's right for you. We
Right.
can try. You know, when you raise kids, I have had that experience. You try to tell them, but the real joy comes when they figure it out for themselves.
Well, that's when they make it their own. It then becomes their own. They own it.
That's right.
Yeah, sure.
So, you know, teaching kids to read, the joy that comes to them when they figure out for themselves how those words go together and what they're saying, they light up with a smile and they just get so delighted with what they've discovered. And that goes through your whole life.
Yeah.
When the light bulb goes on for you and you intuitively know what you should do next or what the next step is, it lights your whole life.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
And from a metaphysical point of view, that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Because you are the captain of yourself. You're the guy in charge. And the way it looks in the picture has nothing to do with anything.
Right. And what's interesting is that in our lives, when people that we're close to or people that we know, we think we have the perfect answers for them. But you got to come to grips with the fact that in their life, your answers are noise.
Yep. So that's why you need to ask yourself questions, because the answers need to be your answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things from your book, or no, This is miscellaneous writings, page 41. The divine principle which governs the universe, including man, if demonstrated, is sufficient for all emergencies.
That's Mary Baker Eddy.
Yeah, miscellaneous writings. So, so that's one. Say a little bit about that, because we've been talking about this in different ways all the way through this.
Yeah, if you can, even for a little tiny bit of time, if you can set aside, or I'll put it in my language, if I can set aside Betty for even a fraction of a minute and allow the principle that's being, that has Betty occur, that principle, allow that to be present, everything is answered. Every single emergency.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Then in Your Mind is the Athlete book, we on page 194, habits of thought have us believe we're localized in a spot occupied by a two-legged ID label. Right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that's just a habit of thought. That's not reality.
Yeah, it's a point of view.
Yeah.
It's not it looks concrete, looks pretty solid, but it is just a point of view of the being that's present when that thing shows up.
Right. Right. Now, here's another one on 195 too. Feelings of remorse are actually an acknowledgement of self-forgiveness in answering the question, how am I living myself that that's happening is occurring? Is that
experience?
Huh?
As my experience.
As my experience. That got cut off.
You need to add it.
Is occurring.
As my experience. How is it? How am I living myself? That this happening is occurring is my experience.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the acknowledgement has a couple of things going for itself. Number one, somebody told me this a long time ago, and it's proven to be true, but the only one that can acknowledge God is God himself.
Yes.
So acknowledgement is not personal. It's not personal at all. So if you have, how am I living myself? There's a self-responsibility going on there. There's a recognition that this isn't occurring happenstance-wise. This isn't just dumb luck.
Right.
That I have this problem. This isn't just, oh dear, I always do the wrong thing. It's not, that we have all those things going on, but actually every single moment, what's going on for you has value. It has real value for you. So you want to walk through it, being aware that there is a divinity that shapes our ends, as Shakespeare quoted. There's a being, whole, perfect, infinite, complete, perfect right now.
Yes.
That has you occur. And when you can quiet the look of you enough to allow that to take over for a second, even for a tiny second, it shifts everything.
Yes. Yeah. Another quote. Mind is the Athlete on page 200. Scientific metaphysics teaches that existence as spirit consciousness is the primary consideration in resolving any human dilemma.
Yeah. From within the problem, even I think that Einstein said you can't solve the problem from within the problem.
Right.
You have to step outside of it. Yeah.
Yep. And then finally, on page 202, all doing and all attachment are the busyness that blinds the doer to self-discovering and has problems both appear and persist.
Yep.
So it's the doing and the attachment. I'm not quite sure I get the doing.
Well, I'm going to do that. That's the thing I need to do. and I am going to do it just that way because I know that's right.
So you should sit, so you're saying sit on your hands?
No, but the efforting is not free. Whenever I'm determined to do it my way, which is many times I've done that, I've had a lot of experience with that. Anyway, but when the doing and the attachment you have to what you're doing, like it's my idea and I'm going to do it, darn it, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
That's the busyness. That's the refusing to get out of your own way. That's a stumbling block, and it blinds you. You see, you don't have any opening for an answer to come through.
Right.
It blinds you totally. And then your problems appear as problems and they persist as problems. They don't have answers show up.
Right.
You're standing in the way, blocking it.
Right. Right. Yeah. So that this whole thing about questions and the power of questions, what do you want to leave people with? The power of questions.
I want to leave them with knowing that when something shows up, they want to look at it and say, wonder what that's all about. What's the value here? What can I see? Looks like a problem to me. What could be the value here? Maybe I should give it another run through, take another look before I step in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. There are a lot of things that'll come up, but ask the question. Be willing to take a look. Be willing to let go of what you thought was the right way to go. Are there other possibilities? Well, we'll look at them and see. Who knows?
So what I hear is stay willing and be open.
Be willing and be open and keep walking on.
There we go. And that concludes our episode for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we look forward to seeing you. I know we look forward to seeing you next week, next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Central. And have a great week. Ask a lot of questions.
Thanks.